This is Rachel Hill for the African American Cultural Gardens Sankofa web series. And in this series, we're going to bring to you some of the most fantastic people in Cleveland who are changing lives, making impacts. One of the things that we also discuss with them is what does Black history and culture mean to them, because that's very important. If we don't know where we came from, we don't know where we're going. And we also talk to them about what do they love about the garden as well. So these are wonderful conversations that we think you should sit down and watch, and you can learn and grow and be inspired, because a garden belongs to all of us and it is so important. But also you need to know about what people in the community are doing to better the community, because we all know that we have better days ahead. Please make sure you stay tuned for all of the episodes in the web series of the Sankofa web series, brought to you by the African American Cultural Gardens.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Association of African American Cultural Gardens Sankofa Educational Series. I'm Wayne Lawson, and we interview shakers and movers around Northeast Ohio, and I am sitting with one of them today, Peter Lawson Jones. He has done so much here in our area, and I don't know where to start, but first of all, once again, just thank you for joining us.
Wayne, it's always great to be in your company and here on behalf of Sankofa and the African American Cultural Gardens. It's a wonderful, perfect confluence of people and things.
Peter, when you first burst on the scene, it was the political scene, but you've done a lot more than that. But just briefly, tell me about what you've done over the years.
Well, I've been an attorney since 1980, and so I practiced law. Most of those ensuing years, I was serving as elected official for 22 years, starting out on Shaker Heights City Council, serving as vice mayor, and then going on to serve in the Ohio General Assembly and the Ohio House of Representatives, and then ultimately and finally as a Cuyahoga County Commissioner. In addition to that, you know, and especially nowadays, you can find me consulting, doing community engagement, consulting, working on a couple of contracts with the City of Cleveland, one coming up with City of Shaker Heights. I still practice law. I've had some interesting transactions that I've handled recently. And about 13 years ago, I started acting again after about a 28-year hiatus.
You're talking about acting again.
Yes.
When did you start acting, and how did you make your way into that particular field?
Well, I started acting in college. One of my roommates was in a play and asked what I was doing that evening, and I said nothing. He said, why don't you come to rehearsal? I went to the rehearsal. They hadn't cast all the roles. I offered to read some of the roles just to facilitate the rehearsal, and at the end of the rehearsal, the director asked me if I wanted those roles, and so I acted throughout college and law school, and then starting up about 13 years ago.
What's most rewarding, acting or being involved in politics?
Well, I think they each have their own individual and unique challenges and their own individual and unique rewards. I think that there's nothing that can be more fulfilling, however, than serving as a public official if you're making a difference. And when you're a public official, you're in the position to positively impact individuals and groups and organizations with the stroke of a pen, with a phone call. And if there's anything I miss about serving an elective office, it's that, being able to make that positive difference in somebody or some organization's life or tenure.
What about the acting part of it? Is that something that's always been there deep down inside, because you do it so effortlessly?
Well, that's kind, because acting should not look like it's acting, so you want to do it effortlessly.
Yeah.
You know, if you'd asked me when I was 10 years old what I wanted to do, I would have told you I wanted to be a professional baseball player, because that was the national pastime. It was the most popular sport when I was growing up. I wanted to be an actor, and I wanted to serve in elective office.
So
I knew that when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
So I did 2 out of 3. That's a pretty good batting average.
That's not bad at all. Let's talk about, as an African American, as a proud African American, when you think about African American history, what has it meant in your life? Why is it important to you?
Well, a couple of things. If we talk globally, what's important to recognize about African American history is that it is not just for us, but it's the history of our country, it's the history of the world, and all the things that people of African descent have done over the centuries to build, to create, to make for a better world. Inventions, our ingenuity, our cultural contributions, all of those things need to be recognized, understood, and appreciated, and shared with those who aren't of African descent or who aren't African American. On the personal level, it's critical to me because I think of those who came before me, my ancestors. My dad was a Tuskegee Airman and played in the Negro Baseball Leagues for the Newark Eagles. My mom was a Cleveland public school teacher, and I think the contribution she made, because she was a teacher for whom whatever the students' needs was, she would make sure they were met. She taught at the old Bolton Elementary School in an impoverished neighborhood, and if the kids needed food, she brought that in. If they needed clothing, if they needed a ride home. So to me, they have left a legacy. So for me, when I think about the history of our people, I don't have to look any further than my mom and dad. I can look at my grandparents. I can look at an uncle who was 3 degrees from Ohio State in the late 20s, early 30s, was at Ohio State Medical School when you could count the number of black medical students at OSU or even the country on a broken, fractured hand.
So you were destined for success. I mean, you had these icons in your family, individuals who were trailblazers in a sense.
Absolutely.
And so you didn't have to look far, as you said.
And two things. Number one, I had no excuse not to succeed, because I had the role models right in my home. Like you said, I didn't have to turn on the TV. I didn't have to pick up a newspaper. I didn't have to turn on the radio. I didn't have to open a book. I had role models, heroes and sheroes right within my own family.
What did they teach you, Peter? What did you learn from your ancestors?
I learned the value of hard work. I learned not to be materialistic. I learned that the most important thing that one can do is give back to one's community, that you had obligations to those to whom much is given, much is expected, much is rightfully demanded. So those were some of the fundamental lessons that I learned, and the value of education as a key to unlocking every door of opportunity. So I learned to have faith. Because I've been in several professions in which there's a lot of failure. Most people who run for public office lose, they don't win. Most people who aspire to careers in acting never get a break, never get on a national TV show, don't have national commercials. I've been blessed to have enjoyed political victories and success as an actor and as a consultant and as an attorney. And so I'm grateful for those. But without the faith that my parents imparted and imbued in me, I wouldn't have had the resilience to bounce back from those times when there are setbacks, when you're defeated, when you don't quite achieve your goal.
Why is African American history important today, to young people today?
When we look at the state of our community, Wayne, in some respects, I think we're worse off than we were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I see a measure of and a level of hopelessness that was unimaginable coming out of the 60s in the civil rights movement, when people died to secure and marched and died and bled and to secure all the freedoms that we enjoy today. But there's a hopelessness. And hopefully those examples of African American achievement can spark a belief and a faith in members in our own community, the young men, the young women, the young boys, the young girls, to believe that they can succeed in the right way, and that they'll be rewarded. Their efforts to pursue education, their diligence, their industriousness will pay off. Those are the lessons I hope are extracted by those young folk today from African American history and the examples of success despite the odds. Because here's the fact: we think we have it hard today. It's a fraction of what our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents went through, and yet they overcame. That ought to inspire somebody, huh? Ought to inspire somebody to say amen.
Amen. And let me ask you this. Why do you think we've taken some steps backwards?
I think the number one reason is the disintegration of the nuclear family. The absence of fathers from far too many homes. 2/3, 70% of African American children are born out of wedlock. So they start behind the 8 ball without having a mother and father nurturing them and engaged in their lives far too frequently. That's one of the culprits. Racism, of course, continues to be a culprit. It's not what it was 3 generations ago, but it still has an insidious presence and effect and impact on our ability to advance and move forward and sustain the gains that we've made. And I think society at large has sent out a message to worship material goods and celebrity over substance. And I think that's had a very deleterious impact on the African American community and frankly the nation as a whole. It's a much more coarse environment than it was when I was growing up.
The election of Barack Obama as President of the United States, we celebrated that. Was that a double-edged sword for African Americans?
Shouldn't have been. That should have sent a very loud message, a clarion call, as it were, that we can succeed and achieve at the very highest levels in the world. There's no person that's more powerful than the President of the United States, nobody across the globe. So that should have been received well. Now, if you're asking, after that, did some relax and think we would have it made and that we still didn't have to work hard, that there still weren't mountains that had to be climbed and obstacles surmounted, that might have been the case, but it shouldn't have been.
And the reaction of a portion of white America, your reaction to that?
Well, there was no question that without President Obama's election, I don't know if you would have had a President Trump, because there are people in our society who have always been able to say, no matter how poorly they were doing personally, I might not be worth anything, but at least I'm not, you fill in the blank, at least I'm not black, at least I'm not a woman, at least I'm not Jewish, at least I'm not gay. You could, there's a whole number of things that people who were abjectly unsuccessful could say and still feel good about themselves. And so when European Americans, those European Americans who have that insecurity, and there's a significant number, see black people, see Latinos, see Asians, see women succeeding, that rocks and shakes their world.
But that can't stop us.
That can't stop us. But that certainly fueled the support for Donald Trump. Not all of those people, but a goodly share are fearful, see themselves falling behind, and when they look at our success, they can no longer, they have to therefore look internally, because in the back of their mind they say, boy, this African American has overcome all these obstacles to succeed. I really don't have an excuse.
For us, I think it's about pride as African Americans. With that in mind, talk about the importance of the African American Cultural Gardens.
Well, first I want to extend kudos and congratulations to the Ewings and to all the other men and women across this community who've come together and made the African American Cultural Garden a reality. Years ago, as I would drive down East Boulevard, now Martin Luther King Boulevard, and you'd see the Italian Cultural Garden flourishing, you'd see the Polish Cultural Garden, the Irish Cultural Garden, you couldn't help but ask yourself, what about us? We've contributed to world history, to American history in quite substantial ways. It could easily be argued that the success, industrial success of America was built on our backs. Our backs were the foundation for that. And so there was something missing. There was a glaring absence in not having our own cultural garden. And hopefully it can be a symbol for what we can achieve right here in this community and celebrate the success of African American Clevelanders.
Same question I asked before, when it relates to the present generation and future generations, what do you think it's going to mean or means to the current generation and the future generation?
Well, sometimes you can take inspiration from things that you simply see fleetingly. And when you have a strong, robust African American cultural garden, a place where people can go and commune, a place where people can go and gather, but just the sight of it, in its beauty, in its strength, in its magnificence, ought to be inspirational.
Final question, and this goes back to the very beginning of our conversation, and I'm just going to ask you, why is that pride? Why is African American history? Why is the African American Garden? Why are all those things important as we move forward as a race in this country?
Because those remind us, all of those things remind us of the building blocks. They remind us, it should remind us, of the sacrifices that were made by many nameless, faceless people for us to be where we are today. And that ought to motivate us. That ought to energize us. That ought to fill us with the kind of pride that we can use to continue to advance our community and overcome some of the things that are really impeding our progress right now. You can't have too many icons. You can't have too many bits of memorabilia. You can't have too many past achievements that to inspire. We need all of them to keep us on the right path and to remedy problems that we see in our community today.
Peter Lawson Jones, thank you for your time. Appreciate you, brother.
Always good to see you,
Thank you,
Wayne.
man. And thank you for watching.
Hello, I'm Carl Ewing, the president of the Association of African American Cultural Gardens. We need your help to complete the African American Cultural Gardens. We learn from our past as we live in the present to secure our future. That's what the African American Cultural Gardens represent, the African American experience. To make your tax-deductible donations, go to AAACG.org. Remember, sow a seed and watch us grow. Thank you.
I'm Beverly Lloyd with the Association of African American Cultural Gardens, bringing you Do You Know? At this time, we'll talk about some trailblazers who had the courage, the brains, and the perseverance to open doors that had never been opened before. As I'm giving facts, see if you can guess their names. This Montreal, Canada native was announced as Princeton University's first Black valedictorian. In the 275 years of Princeton's existence, this young man was quoted as saying, "Being the first Black valedictorian at Princeton is incredibly empowering, given that the first 9 presidents of Princeton were slave owners themselves." He is going to get his doctorate in operations research and find solutions for health care and finance. If you guessed Nicholas Johnson, then you do know.